For the first time in a while, we're actually having some conflicting reports. There are some parts about this Tony DeAngelo story that are shared between the high-up, respected analysts and insiders in the NHL community, but there are other parts of this situation that are kind of conflicting, depending on who you ask. So, we're going over an update on Tony DeAngelo and highlighting a few teams that actually have apparently gone out there and done their due diligence, according to Bob McKenzie, and actually checked in, see what the price is, and had conversations about the New York Rangers, former Tampa Bay Lightning, former Arizona Coyotes, right-handed defenseman who is indeed in a little bit of hot water after a conflict with New York Rangers goaltender and fellow teammate Alexander Georgiev, which resulted in DeAngelo being waived, unclaimed, and now in the position to being traded amongst the other NHL teams. So, we're going over a few sources here. First off, it's our friend David on Twitter who made a post with a video from NBCSN. It's a segment with Bob McKenzie where they ask him what's the market like for Tony DeAngelo. The tweet summarizes it over here, but the video encapsulates what it says as well. Bob McKenzie says there are 4 or 5 teams interested in DeAngelo, including Calgary, Detroit, and the 2 SoCal teams, LA and Anaheim. The Rangers are not interested in retaining back salary. McKenzie said if they can't trade him, DeAngelo would be bought out this offseason, and McKenzie actually goes into good detail as to what a buyout for Tony DeAngelo could look like. DeAngelo right now is making $4.8 million AAV until 2022. If he gets bought out, there is a $300,000 penalty upcoming, and then there is an $800,000 penalty the year after. So the Rangers, if they're not able to trade DeAngelo, can just go out there and buy him out. And it's the reason why, in this position, they're not interested in retaining salary or taking on a big, massive contract back the other way, which contradicts what I was kind of saying a few videos ago, asking whether or not a team could actually just send over a bad contract just for the Rangers to get rid of this guy. But Bob McKenzie kind of clears that up and he says that's not the plan. Now, we have a conflicting report here because Elliot Friedman on Sportsnet the other day had his own little spiel. This is from the most recent edition of the 31 Thoughts article. This was published 2 days ago on February 2nd, and the third thought in this article says the Rangers have made it clear they will eat salary to facilitate a Tony DeAngelo trade. Now, that is a complete contradiction to what Bob McKenzie said. But I will say, Bob McKenzie went over and he did provide a good explanation as to why the Rangers would not want to eat salary, because the alternative would be they could just, buy him out and suffer a very small penalty. But I think the compromise here might be in actually getting a player of value, because I think the way Bob McKenzie framed it, it kind of insinuated that the Rangers wouldn't just go out there and make a trade for the sake of making a trade and acquiring a bad contract in the process. It's more they would be just looking for a good player, and whether or not that player is good but he costs a lot of money, or good but he's cheap, I think that may be where the divide is between the Friedman report and the Bob McKenzie report. But either way, I wanted to talk about the teams over here that are discussed. LA, Anaheim, Detroit, Calgary. Now, I did my own due diligence here, first and foremost, and I went over onto each of the team's subreddits and tried to see what their fan reaction was to hearing that their teams might be interested in Tony DeAngelo. Calgary fans did not like it. They were like, okay, why? Come on, Treliving, please don't do this. Detroit fans were like, I'm kind of confused as to why Steve Yzerman would go back out there and acquire a player that he once recently moved after giving up on a year after his development started with the Tampa Bay Lightning all those years ago and try to circle back. We'll get more to that later, but next up on the LA Kings front, I didn't actually see too many people talking about it. It was just kind of joking around saying that, the team is already really bad on the right side, so they're actually trying to go out there and get a guy to help him out. But for the Anaheim side, I saw a lot of Anaheim Ducks fans kind of just rebelling against this idea, saying that the character issues and the incidents that have happened over the years kind of put him in a position where it is kind of difficult trying to justify having this kind of personality in your locker room. And that's just the fan sentiment side of things. I haven't discussed my own personal thoughts on this yet, but from what I've seen thus far, it appears that all the people who cheer for these fan bases that have been mentioned by Bob McKenzie mostly are just kind of against the idea of trading for DeAngelo because, like it or not, character things, overall personality, ability to mesh with a team and actually be a good locker room guy, just from the way that things are going on social media, I do think that fans see a lot more importance in that kind of stuff than NHL GMs would, but Who knows? Bob McKenzie just said that these teams are checking in, not that a trade is imminent, but that they're talking about it. And of course, if they're talking about it, it means that they're in some form interested. It's just the extent of the interest is just that of having conversations about the player. Let's go over Calgary. A lot of people were talking about whether or not Sam Bennett for DeAngelo 1-for-1 in some world would work out. I don't know, man. I really don't know. That's a very... honestly kind of skewed one to go through. I think just in terms of an on-ice value perspective, Tony DeAngelo does have a lot more to offer. Sam Bennett does light it up in the playoffs, which is really weird about his overall profile, but DeAngelo at the very least can produce offensively, or at least he was able to last year. Defensively, he's got a lot of work to do, but he is in his mid-20s, so you could debate that the work that is capable of being done is minimal, but Sam Bennett is in that territory where I guess you could say he does have some form of potential going into the long term to get better, in terms of his regular season performance, consistency, all that stuff. If I have to bet, honestly, I don't think the Rangers would go out there and acquire just Sam Bennett for DeAngelo, especially considering the value of what DeAngelo has meant to the team last year when he was producing all those points. I just don't see it happening, 1-for-1. Maybe there's some other stuff that can go out there, maybe some picks, maybe some other prospects, who knows. The Rangers probably would be in a position to maybe make a trade that would actually improve their team. I think it's quite easy to do that when you have somebody like DeAngelo who doesn't really defend all too well. Next up, though, the Detroit Red Wings. Now, we spoke about this in a previous video, but Steve Yzerman did have a few quotes to talk about with DeAngelo after Steve Yzerman drafted him in 2014 with the Lightning. Here are the quotes once again. I'll pull it up on the screen for you right here. Tony DeAngelo has acted in ways that are unacceptable in society today, but we believe he's a good kid. And we're going to give him the opportunity. But we're going to hold him to the expectations of all our players in Tampa. Any improper conduct won't be tolerated, but he's 18 years old. I was 18 at one time and did a lot of things that wouldn't be acceptable in today's society too. Kids change and we expect him to change. We believe he'll change and grow up. This is referring to his days in the OHL before he was drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning, where he called his teammate a racial slur. Yeah, it's not even calling the ref or an opponent that, it's calling your own teammate that. This, combined with the off-ice incident with Alexander Georgiev, plus the other anger stuff that DeAngelo has had in the past, it is quite interesting for Steve Yzerman to go out there and maybe be making his due diligence calls. We have noted it before that Steve Yzerman does want to go out there and make moves, get picks, get younger, get assets. So while I don't really think Steve Yzerman would think that DeAngelo is the best player on the market and that he actually wants to get him for his hockey team into the long-term future, what I do think is that Steve Yzerman would just go out there and maybe think about just having a conversation just to see what other stuff he can get. Because if he ends up getting like a second or a third round pick out of this as well, who says that he can't just make a trade, get this guy, get a nice pick, and then buy him out afterwards too? Steve Yzerman's always looking for the ins and outs of the NHL, try to get more assets for himself, so I would not be surprised to see something like that pulled off. It's just, I would be kind of surprised if Yzerman, the guy who already gave up on him before, would be in a position to say, yeah, he's going to work out on our team, and we're going to play with him, and he's going to be a long-term part of our future. As for LA and Anaheim, I would not be surprised if they exhibited somewhat of a similar mindset as the Red Wings and Steve Yzerman, because those teams are also kind of rebuilding teams. The Kings have been winning a few games here and there. I mean, they beat the Avs a few times, but that's about it. Their right side is indeed kind of weak, though, so I think out of all these teams that are mentioned, I think LA has the highest potential of actually having this guy on their squad and using him. It's just going to be really interesting to see DeAngelo in LA, of all teams. The team that seems to have taken all the reclamation projects. They got Lias Andersson earlier in the offseason. They're giving out a chance to Andreas Athanasiou to work his magic. Who knows if DeAngelo could go over there and help them out as well. As for the Anaheim Ducks, well, the Ducks have a whole bunch of stuff to look forward to in the future. We've noted the forward core with Comtois, with Zegras, with Lundstrom. They've got some pretty nice pieces. But they just got Jamie Drysdale in the draft this most recent season, so I think their number one right-handed defenseman spot in the long-term future is kind of taken up. So I don't really know what DeAngelo would be to the Ducks if he were to be a part of that system, but of course, time will tell. Who knows if they're actually just going out there doing the same Steve Yzerman kind of, okay, we'll trade him, we'll get a pick back, and then we'll buy him out kind of thing that I suggested earlier. But talk to me in the comments what you think about Tony DeAngelo and these four teams that are apparently interested in him, having conversations, checking out what the price would be, and seeing how that could fit into their lineup. It's the Calgary Flames, it's the Red Wings, it's the Kings, and it's the Ducks, all from the man himself, the Bob Father, Bob McKenzie. Let me know in the comments what you think. What would the return be We discussed one team in potential returns with Calgary and Sam Bennett, but these other teams do have other assets that might be seen as valuable to the New York Rangers, so let me know in the comments what you think would be a package. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.